Howdy, your marketing fans, and welcome back. I think it's important for you guys to really understand the basic digital advertising ecosystem. There's a lot that happens every single time a web page with an advertisement on it is loaded, and that process has evolved tremendously since the start of digital advertising in the mid to late 90s. If you are already familiar with these concepts, like ad exchanges and ad networks and real-time bidding and programmatic advertising, then by all means, once again, you could skip right through these sections. But I think it's important to either get a refresher course, but most importantly, it's important to understand these concepts, because while remarketing really only takes into account a small percentage or a specific kind of slice of that digital marketing pie, the concepts and the foundation of what happens when you send a remarketing ad onto another website to track your previous website visitors, it's really tapping into that same infrastructure. Additionally, if you're going to go on to run more than just remarketing campaigns, and I'm sure you will, you're going to be running search campaigns, remarketing campaigns, display campaigns, mobile campaigns, video campaigns, native advertising, whatever it may be, it will be very helpful to understand what's really happening, who's doing what the technologies are, what the systems are. So my goal here and in the next couple sections is to give you that overview, is to give you that sense, and to kind of simplify a lot of the confusion and clarify a lot of what happens when a web page is loaded, when there's an ad on the page, and what the different steps that take place are and how those steps will affect you, the advertiser. So let's dive in real quick to this keynote presentation I made for you guys. No matter how complicated advertising gets or how sophisticated the technologies and the softwares become, advertising online is essentially a relationship between two primary parties. That is the publisher and the advertiser. When I say the word publisher, or when you hear the word publisher online, the publisher is anybody who owns a website, and the publisher's primary purpose is to develop content that people want to consume, whether that be a video, whether that be blog posts, whether that be a newsletter, whether that be an e-commerce site. It's content that's supposed to draw an audience, and one of the probably the most popular way of monetizing a website, especially for sure a news site, any news outlet, monetizes their traffic with advertisements. So they want to draw high quality traffic. They want that traffic to be interested in their content. The quality of their content is going to be directly related to the quality of the traffic, the types of people that come to their website, and their hope is to then take their audience, take their traffic and present it as something valuable to other advertisers. Okay, so the publishers, examples of the publishers are the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, MSNBC, Budget Bites, your mother's cooking blog, or your brother's website for his favorite bands and his reviews of them, whatever it may be. Any website that has content is a publisher. So the publisher is the first step in this advertising ecosystem. And of course, ESPN, another example of a publisher website. Now you have the advertiser. The advertiser is you, or the agency, companies that want to have ads. So it's the advertiser and it's the publisher. Okay, and no matter how complex this relationship gets, all the different pieces involved, all the technologies, it's ultimately about connecting advertisers and publishers. Publishers have one goal. They want to get the most revenue out of each impression, out of each click. Advertisers have one goal. They want to maximize their ROI. They want to maximize the efficiency and the scale of their advertising campaigns, and they want to reach their consumers in the right place at the right time and with the right message. Traditionally, the way advertisers and publishers connected was simply over the phone. Before there were these complex digital ad networks and ad serving technologies, advertisers had sales teams, publishers had sales teams, and they would get on the phone with each other, they'd meet in person, and they'd strike a deal. You're an advertiser, you want to take out a homepage out of the Wall Street Journal, you call up the Wall Street Journal sales team, you meet with them, you literally negotiate a deal, and you buy what we call direct guaranteed inventory. The word inventory is used to describe any section or any place on a web page that is supposed to have an ad on it, that the publisher wants to have an ad. Advertisers were buying premium guaranteed inventory. We weren't bidding by the impression. Advertisers were buying blocks of impressions in the thousands. CPM, cost per thousand. It stands for cost per mil, which is the most common way of buying ads on the internet. And this was guaranteed, meaning if I bought 10,000 impressions, I prepaid you for those 10,000 impressions. You made sure, and I was able to make sure, the advertiser was able to make sure that I received those 10,000 impressions. They're premium because we're not talking about far-off websites. We're not talking about little cooking blogs. We were talking about, back in the day, real substantial websites like Forbes, like the Wall Street Journal, like Yahoo, getting real traffic to their website. So premium guaranteed inventory. What happened was, because there was such a huge demand for ad inventory, publishers started creating thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of pages on the internet. So instead of having these small contained blogs where it was possible for the sales team to start selling these ad impressions, selling the inventory for all the publishers started having millions, literally millions of web pages, and it was impossible to keep up with the demand. So what happened was there was lots of what we call remnant ad inventory, leftover subprime ad inventory that wasn't getting sold to the advertiser, because the advertisers' teams weren't able to by the human amount of work output, they weren't able to strike deals to capture all the remnant inventory that the publishers had to offer. So there was a huge amount of supply, and there was a huge amount of demand also, but there just wasn't the systems in place to fill that supply and demand channel. So publishers had an excess of remnant inventory. So what that led to initially was the creation of ad networks. Now, keep in mind, the direct relationship between publisher and advertiser over the phone, that still exists today in a major way. A lot of big brands actually primarily only buy direct from the publisher over the phone, real in-person deals where they're selling their primary inventory. For example, if you want to do a takeover of the Wall Street Journal homepage or Bloomberg News homepage, there's no software technology in the world today that will allow you to run your ads in that way on those publishers. You got to call them up, you got to strike a deal. It's a person-to-person sort of thing. But what happened was, to deal with all this remnant leftover inventory, which is still extremely high quality inventory, we had the birth of ad networks. Ad networks are exactly like a mortgage broker. What they did was they found a buyer and they found a seller. They packaged up blocks of ads. They bought those ads from a publisher and they sold them to advertisers at a marked up cost. So, for example, an ad network was a company that would go to the Wall Street Journal, would go to MSNBC, would go to ESPN, and they would buy millions of impressions on their sports sections that talk about high school sports. And this was all contextual. So they had a category. We have a category of millions of impressions in this category across many different publishers. So what they did then is they took that block of ads, they brought that to the advertiser, and they sold those ads to the advertiser. You also had third-party audience networks that instead of focusing on the what, the content, they started focusing on the who. Using cookies, we'll talk about cookies, what cookies are in a minute, but we were able to, third-party audience networks were companies that were able to track user behavior and say, okay, you were a 30 to 40-year-old female interested at do-it-yourself projects. Okay, so an advertiser was interested in that user really irregardless of what specific publisher that user was on at the time. So advertisers now were able to buy prepackaged traffic from ad networks, prepackaged traffic from third-party audience networks, and they started having the ability to really run these campaigns at scale. There were some major issues with the ad network model. Chief among them was transparency. Advertisers weren't really able to see, in most cases, exactly which publisher sites their ads were showing up on. Another major issue was the pricing model transparency. Ad networks were buying all this inventory from publishers. They were marking it up and they were reselling it to advertisers. So advertisers didn't really know how much their traffic was being marked up, and they weren't really able to get a very clear sense of what their true cost per impression was. Another issue with ad networks was as additional ad networks were popping up, and there were hundreds and thousands of ad networks, publishers were selling the same ad slots to multiple networks, and advertisers, as a result, ended up buying the same exact inventory multiple times. So they were double, triple, quadruple paying for the same ad slot on the same exact website, which of course ended up being a huge waste of money for the actual advertisers. Another issue with the ad networks is there was a major shift over the course of a few years into more OBA, online behavioral advertising. We're talking about OBA. This is that pixel-based, cookie-based advertising where advertisers started to have the ability to track the who and target the who rather targeting the what, targeting which website, which publisher. So it was great. I was able to make a pretty educated guess that my products would likely appeal to people reading the sports section of ESPN. But that was a much less sophisticated way of targeting users based on interest and based on actual intent browsing activity. So the cookie-based advertising, the online behavioral advertising, that model that the third-party audience networks introduced allowed advertisers to start targeting people rather than publishers. So I was able to target by income, by demographic, by browsing activity, by recent purchases, where I recently flew. These were all unidentifiable information. It was anonymous information. We didn't know who the person was themselves. We didn't know their name, but it gave the advertiser a brand new vista of success and specificity and focused advertising. We were really able to start targeting the right person, and it didn't really matter where they were, because any specific person who might be interested in my products, and they might have actually displayed intent in my products, it's not that much of a factor which particular publisher, which particular website they're on now. People read all different types of websites at all times. What was really good was the ability to target who that person was, and that was one of the biggest reasons why ad networks started taking a back seat. And what we're going to discuss in the next lecture, the modern ad exchange model was born, and the ad exchange 100% revolutionized what modern display advertising is and what it continues to be today. It introduced brand new technologies, it introduced brand new targeting parameters, and it totally changed the picture on how advertisers buy ads and target users and how publishers sell their ads. So let's in the next section talk about what the modern ad exchange is, what the current model using the ad exchange looks like, who the key players are, and then we're going to bridge it all back to what this all has to do with remarketing and how remarketing fits into this entire picture. So thanks again, and we'll see you in a couple minutes in the next chapter.